As I'm finishing up my recovery from Legal Week 2024, I want to talk about generative AI that's been discussed during the show. So everyone was talking about it. Everything's got Gen AI built in, and people were throwing all kinds of words around and saying things that not necessarily made sense. And I think I realized that the generative AI is the most confusing topic and e-discovery that we have right now. So what I want to do today is share with you some red flags that should pop up in your head when you hear certain words being mentioned to you. This way, when you're at another conference or listening to a sales presentation, you could know that someone either not telling you the truth or they may not know things themselves. So let's talk about that. First thing I want to talk about is if someone says, we're training our own model. If you hear that, a red flag should pop up in your head and you should go, The reason for that is either they are really smart and they're actually doing it, or they actually don't know what they're talking about. Training your own general purpose model costs millions of dollars, and it's a whole thing unto itself. It's not something you just set up some computers in your office and run it. It's a really big undertaking. If you hear someone say that, you can start probing them with some further questions like, so how are you doing fine-tuning? How are you doing with how many humans do you have evaluating the results, And they may start like, well, I actually don't know. I'm gonna need somebody to get back to you on something. And they're probably, making stuff up. Now, there is a thing where you can get your own model, and that would be a special model that's designed to do one very specific thing. Those are available for download, and people build them themselves. But there is no one who is trying to recreate like a ChatGPT model on their own. The next thing I heard people say, hallucination is no longer an issue. It's kind of a weird thing to say, like, that's been solved, that's done. Like, hallucination is not a problem. And that's not really true. As far as language models, nothing's changed about the models. What changed is we are getting a little bit smarter as to how we prompt those models. And by creating smart and clever prompts, we can reduce chance of hallucination, but not necessarily eliminating that. So we haven't really solved the problem. If the person is using best practices and they're using good prompts, they can definitely reduce chance of hallucination. But for someone to say, that's not an issue anymore, it's been eliminated, it's been solved, and just kind of forget about it, that's not right. Next, claims of a big context window. So you may hear it like, oh, we have a giant context window, we can put so much documents into it. Don't be so quick. So quick recap, context window is total amount of text that goes in and out of the language model in one transaction. So the text of a document plus prompt plus the response, all that add up together should be less than the context size of the language model. Now, the context window is getting bigger and bigger with different models, but it's not like suddenly got like this huge or infinite. The context window is getting like bigger and bigger and bigger. But when someone says like, oh, we went from here, and suddenly we're like, oh, over there we have a giant one. That's something you want to be cautious, because while there are people on the internet that make that claim and there are models that make that claim, that big context window is actually not very effective. It loses the information that you send. In a way, I think it's kind of like just runs it through like a summarization stage first. So some information gets dropped off, and then information gets reduced until it fits into the real context window. So there is some trickery going on. So beware of when someone's making the claim of a context window bigger than what's generally available now. And the last item that's going to be somewhat controversial, it is that you can ask your documents whatever question you want, and generative AI will answer question about your documents. While it seems like that's what it can do, that's not actually what happens on the back end. The large language model does not read your documents and answer your question. Here's how it works. Your document goes through sort of like a clustering process. So imagine we have X and Y, and we have sort of like a plane. And on that plane, we're going to put our documents on. We're just going to put some here, some there, and they're going to start form kind of clusters of similar documents, which, clustering, I think we're all kind of done that. So first thing we're going to do is take our documents and cluster them on this plane. After we do that, we're going to come up with a question that we want to ask those documents. And what we'll do is we'll take a question and we're going to cluster that as well. So that question is going to fall somewhere on that plane next to whatever random documents. And what we're going to do then is we're going to take the question and the nearby document or documents and send those to a large language model. So what happens when you ask a question? You're not asking generative model a question. You clustering your question together with other documents, and then you finding similar documents, and only then you sending them to the large language model. So if your clustering is off, or if you don't grab enough documents around it, well, the large language model may not know how to answer that question because a document was outside of the sort of boundaries of the cluster that you identified. And there are different ways of also dealing with this. You could chop up your documents into smaller pieces, and then you can cluster the pieces, and you could take multiple pieces and send them to LLM. So there are all kinds of ways of doing it. But the point is, when you see a demo, when someone shows you that you can type a question, and it seems like you're asking your entire case, you're not really using generative AI to ask the entire case. There are lots of other steps happen, and those steps don't actually involve generative AI. They do involve some kind of AI, but not the model itself. Well, I hope this is going to be helpful to you next time you attend a sales meeting or traveling for a conference. If you did find this useful, please tell me in the comment section below. Don't forget to follow on LinkedIn, subscribe on YouTube, and I will see you on another video.